Welcome to But Why, real talk on messy minds and messier systems, the podcast where two psychologists overanalyze everything so you don't have to. We're here to unpack the weird, the worrying, and the wildly unjust with just enough existential dread to keep it interesting. I'm Dr. Kristin.
And I'm Dr. Laura. Let's dive into the mess.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
I like your top. What do you call it? A
thank
jumper.
you.
We would say sweater.
It is a
It
jumper.
is with a frog on it.
It has got a frog on it. It's knitted and it's got holes. Sometimes I wear this to work meetings, and then when you've dressed yourself, but then you go on a video call and you're like, oh no, that's not appropriate because it's got holes in it. And I'm like, I shouldn't have worn this.
Oh no, they can see part of your shoulder. What will they think?
Well, they're probably going to be like, well, anyway, So now I'm very conscious of wearing this top to a work meeting for some reason. So there you go. But it is very soft and comfy. So
that's nice.
Enjoy the neckline. Right. So yes. What does your top say? I feel like you've got.
It says, yes. I am no man.
This is accurate.
I am no man. Factually accurate, and also, obviously, Lord of the Rings.
Obviously.
We like nice when things are accurate and related to Lord of the Rings.
That makes them the best.
The best
thing. We last episode I was in Lord of the Rings, and now this episode you're in Lord of the Rings.
I didn't even put two and two together.
Perfect. Well, talking about last time, I suppose.
Yes.
Last time we time traveled, if you remember. It was so much fun.
Is this going to be as good as your awkward introduction last time?
Gosh, I didn't know what's going to happen. We might start strong, but it might, who knows where we'll end up. but yeah, so we time traveled, right? So Kristin kind of took us through the history of witches and werewolves, vampires, Frankenstein, mummies, zombies. So we learned a lot about, their histories, but how I suppose they start to act as a bit of a mirror to ourselves and some of the things that we fear. So we ended with the thought last time around how history is telling us when monsters appeared, right? But we still need to bring the psychology, of course. So we need psychology to tell us why we still need these monsters. So today, this is the last kind of episode for this 3-part monster series.
Aww.
Well, monsters. But what we're gonna talk about, you've probably heard us talk about some of these bits and pieces throughout the other episodes. But what we're going to try and do is just really bring it all together into kind of a bit of a neater manual, so to speak, to make sense of the monsters that we've spoken to you about. So let's have a bit of a chat then about how our brain was built to see monsters.
I think that's the fun thing is last time we went into socially what was happening to create the monsters, I suppose, and we kind of talked a little bit about the psych mechanisms underneath. But psychologically though, why? But why? The last episode is always a but why. So I don't have as melodic of a voice as Laura, but I'm gonna try and put you into the context, okay? Picture this. Yeah, this is why I don't do guided meditation, because my voice is not conducive to this kind of thing.
It is.
I'll try. I will try. So picture this. You're at a campfire 40,000 years ago. It's quiet. Some would say too quiet. You hear a rustle behind you, and if you run and it's only the wind, you're wasting some energy, a few calories, that meal that you worked really hard to get. But if you don't run and it's a predator, you die. And so natural selection always picks the jumpy ones. It picks the nervous ones. And that jumpiness is the starting point of everything to do with monsters.
It's why we're alive.
It is why we're alive. It's literally from that simple choice is how the human mind is shaped, right? So our answers survived on over detection. So you assume every rustle, every shadow or flicker or something had a bad intent behind it. And this is something that cognitive scientists call the hyperactive agency detective device. Or detection, not detective. That sounds so fun.
Detective.
And it's essentially a neural bias that prefers like a false alarm to a missed threat, because obviously the consequences are less extreme, right? So this is a really interesting one to me as well, because it's kind of formed this human need for context and to know why and to explain things. But I'll get to that in a little bit. Because fear came first and understanding comes after that, right? So, and that's what we talk about with a lot with the monsters, but also what's happening right now in society. We talk about fear mongering, and there's a purpose to that, because fear circuitry in your brain always goes first. It fires before your analysis. It's the first thing to happen. And this is because it's like an amygdala response. And so if you guys know anything about our brains, that's like the back. That's the first evolved part of our brains. That's the kind of primary thing that drives our fight or fight, flight, freeze, fawn, etc. And
it's
that
like our,
always reacts.
like our alarm system.
It is. It is our alarm system. And that reacts before your prefrontal cortex, which is what you would say where our logic and nuance and et cetera, to put it very basically. So your amygdala reacts way before your prefrontal cortex even receives that data, right? So this react first, think later architecture, I suppose, kept us alive. But then, like we say all the time, it never got the off switch. So we are living in a world that we are not evolved to live in our brains. So modern life has changed so much faster than any brain could evolve. And so we still kind of startle at the shadows and try to personify what we don't understand. And so literally our brains are built to see monsters, and we don't have an evolutionary off switch. And once we had the capacity as a species to tell stories and build society and culture, those kind of false alarm systems started to become folklore and monsters and myths and legends. And so that's why I find it so fascinating.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, yeah, that's the starting point for us building them, imagining them, writing about them, sort of thing. And of course, as well, I think it's important to note that this, like, I guess, early alarm system or detecting system, like, is really useful. Like, I think we can often give it a bit of a bad rap in a sense, because we can be so, like, having so many false alarms, especially like say in modern day. But sometimes that can be helpful. And I think what it is as well, it's like us being able to recognize whenever we had, say, like one of these false alarms, and kind of, is that something we need to act on? Is that something we don't need to act on, sort of thing? But yeah, that's the reason, I suppose, though, behind why we then see monsters everywhere.
That's that like rational thought, isn't it? It's like, okay, once the fear happened, a very uniquely human thing to do is reflect on that and see. But that's like a heavy assumption that most people do that. They don't. You know what I mean? So but it can be super useful, as in like, why have I reacted to this in this way? Because everyone reacts to fear or has different thresholds for fear and other amygdala responses. So it is something super useful to reflect on. The other like part that I find super fascinating as a psychologist, and I always like have been since I was like a kid, is how our brain fills in gaps. And I first learned about, like, I took evolutionary psychology, which is riddled with issues, right? It's bias and patriarchy and stuff like that. But the basis of it, like of our actual brain, is super interesting, the human brain and how we build patterns and fill in gaps. Maybe I've always been interested in this because being autistic, I experience this different than a lot of people. But you guys should know, like, perception isn't like a passive thing. It's not like a camera lens that just takes a shot. And actually, a camera lens is actually a really good one because you can adjust it. You know what I mean? The same camera can take very different photos depending on the lens you apply to it. But your perception is predictive. It's not necessarily just a objective snapshot of the world. It doesn't record reality. A lot of it guesses reality based on small fragments and constantly like filling in these blanks with prior experience. That's how we learn, right? That's literally why we learn off of modeling, our parents and other things. It's literally the core human thing. right? And that's why people see faces in clouds and voices and like static stuff, or like, I don't know, faces and fire and stuff like that, right? It's
Mm.
just like pattern completion, not
Mm.
necessarily pattern recognition. And this pattern completion reduces uncertainty and the nervous system. So, like, this
Yes.
ability to fill in that gap with something that, even if it's scary, might be more comforting, just like calms you a little bit,
Mm.
right?
This made me think of something that happened. Was it a few months ago? It didn't happen to me, but we were at like it was my partner's dad's birthday, and one evening we like sat down around the table like telling ghost stories. I hate ghost stories because they
Me
make me feel
too.
really really uncomfortable. Like I
Same.
really don't enjoy it. But so one of the ones that his sister was telling was about, it was actually about one of her friends, and I think they were like in the process of like moving out of their house, and they have like, one of those cameras or whatever for in the house, but you can hear sounds and see
Mm,
the video and stuff. And they just kind of put it face up on one of their tables and just left it there and like forgot that it was on. But they like went back to they didn't go back to it. It kind of gives you a little alert when there's like
yeah.
movement or something. So they had the alert. And then when they went to watch it, like if you turn the volume up, it's really horrible. Like you can basically like, it sounds like someone like running like really heavily like up the stairs, like thud, like and when you're trying to make sense of it, again come back to this idea of like pattern and like experiences and so on, you just think, well, that must be what it just sounds like somebody like running up the stairs, like what else
Mm.
could it be? And then there's this like really loud static as well. So again, it's like how we actually use, I guess, like ghost stories and kind of, what's the word? I don't know. But yeah, how we use like ghost stories to help us make sense of what's going on that we can't explain.
Well, that's exactly it. It's like using this as a way to explain what can't be explained,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's huge theories and evidence. I'm not religious, so I see it as evidence, right? That this is where God came from, or any religion's God or gods came from, is this sense of this general need. We can link it back to the existential bit as well, which we will discuss at the end. This need to explain a lack of understanding of what's going
Yeah.
on, right? I felt a shiver, that's a ghost. But like, I also feel this sudden sense of like wonder or awe, or I can't explain, XYZ, or I saw a face in the shadows. And evolutionary psychology, some psychology says that, okay, well, it actually made more sense in some ways to fill it with like a benevolent being, like a god,
Yes.
instead of a scary monster.
That's what I was
So
thinking, because I
like,
was just thinking like, surely you don't want to fill it with like, because that's what I'm like, I don't want it to be a ghost, so I'm just gonna like say it's not, that's not real.
it's just the
Like,
fae. It's the fae coming to collect
yeah,
us.
exactly. That's much nicer.
And not the scary ones. It's the nice ones
No,
who are
the
rich
really
and
nice
definitely live in
ones.
mansions.
Yeah.
But like, and this is what makes humans so, like, this is part of our creativity as well, is like evolution favors imagination over accuracy with these kinds of things. It's better to overinterpret, like, or interpret wrongly, I guess, than underreact.
Mm.
But that same system that helped us live is now fueling conspiracy theories, which is not great. Urban legends, fine, but enough, and horror films, right?
Yeah.
So anywhere from like media through to legit conspiracy theories that are killing people. So
Oh gosh.
essentially,
It's like coping mechanisms gone mad. Do you know what I mean?
yes, literally. It's like, well, we don't have a need for this anymore, and we have too much stuff we don't understand in this modern age. So let's put that energy, let's displace it, like we talked about in the first episode. And so essentially these monsters, because we're talking about monsters, I guess we gotta stay focused. Kristin, stay focused.
Monsters.
They are byproducts of this kind of like ancient safety feature that's still trying to run in the modern world. It's like an old school computer trying to keep up with like way more input
Yeah.
than. And the thing that I do want to mention quickly is that not all brains are designed the same. And so what I just described is people with like hierarchical top to bottom thinking. So your brain works in hierarchies and you fill in the gaps underneath the overarching thing. But there are people who have bottom up processing, like autistic people. So I just want to touch on that very quickly. I won't dig into it too much, but just as a really interesting thing, because autistic people will experience monsters differently because of this bottom up thinking. So where most brains predict first and fill in the blanks automatically, autistic brains kind of tend to wait for evidence and then processing the raw sensory input before forming that narrative. And neuroscientists love to describe this as weaker predictive coding because, obviously we suck as autistic people because the brain relies less on assumption and more on data. So obviously that makes us a problem. It can be described as more precise, but also more intense because that means that every sound, every light, every texture arrives unfiltered. There's nothing telling us that we don't need to know that information.
So we've spoken then a bit about, I guess, how our brains are kind of processing information, how this might be different for, I guess, like different neurotypes, different brains, and I guess how we see patterns. But there's also another piece to this, which we have spoken about as we've been going through the episodes, which is this idea of projection, or like the mind's mirror, if you like. So once we could imagine agency, we could also imagine guilt. So what couldn't be explained externally, we would end up blaming internally. So Freud called it the uncanny, so fear of the almost familiar. So this mirror image, if you like, that just won't behave. We also spoke about the idea of abjection, which was kind of named by Julia Kristeva. So this is that psychic process of kind of spitting out what threatens identity. So we basically end up displacing this fear, this guilt that we have onto something else. So we're displacing our own guilt, our own whatever it might be, onto one of these monsters. And that's kind of, I suppose, like helping people to live with some of these really uncomfortable and like difficult feelings that we might have about ourselves or about, say, society at this point in time, which we kind of spoke a little bit about in the previous episode.
Projection is something that we always have to be super aware of as psychologists because it's such a natural thing because, like we said, most brains fill in the gaps. And then when something makes them uncomfortable, they, especially in like something that's really, I don't know, like meaningful or deep or big, I guess like a big emotion, they want to displace it or project it somewhere else so that it doesn't have to be dealt with internally. Long term, that can cause some pretty difficult like psychological issues, but also it happens in sessions with clients where they might displace fear or anger or rejection on us. And so it's something that we have to be super aware of, but it also happens on a day-to-day base. We all do it. Like in our monsters, we're projecting our feelings onto, I don't know, I'm gonna eat this giant block of cheese. Like do it that way. And it's just like a coping mechanism.
Yeah, totally. And I think a common one that you often hear people talk about is like, you've been out, had a rough day at work or something, and you come home and you kind of take that out like on your partner. So you're kind of projecting those emotions or blaming, if you like, on something else to try and help deal with the discomfort of it. So that can kind of be the role of the monster in this scenario. And one of the things, one of my favorite like metaphors that we use in ACT, so like in acceptance and commitment therapy, is about actually trying to befriend that monster. So like talking metaphorically about like our own monsters that we might have. And actually the really, I guess, this natural human part of us says, push that monster away, do not want that monster is scary, monster is horrible, like shut the door on it. But instead we try and use this metaphor. Of course, if the person is I suppose psychologically safe enough in a sense to allow that monster in, we would be kind of encouraging them to like be with and accept and like see the monster. Do you know what I mean? So like so we talk about like instead of shutting it out, letting it in and making it a cup of tea, and actually realizing, kind of like in the Frankenstein scenario, right, that actually that monster just needs a little bit of love and a little bit of care, and it's not going to end up being as scary as like we think it is.
And for you, the monsters are like an anxiety or some other emotion that might be projected out.
Yeah, totally. It could be that anxiety, it could be fear of something, it could be um even just like understanding who we really are, like underneath everything we could be
Mm.
fearful of that. So again, yeah, any of these I guess kind of internal events that we want to push away and not face up to.
Yeah, I think, and a hot tip, guys, projection does not work for your well-being. So speak to your monster, give it some tea or coffee,
Yeah,
depending,
give your monster a
depending.
name. Yeah.
Yes. Well, individual psychology is super important with this. We have to look at social psychology and sociology because we are social animals. And you see what fear is like on a group scale, right? There's a reason, there's a lot of research into what like fear does to people on large scales, from fascism through to crowd control, like what happens when a whole crowd of people is scared and people end up caught under people's feet and die. Like crowds are crazy if they're afraid. And in anthropology, somebody called Mary Douglas, she observed that societies treat boundary breakers as kind of like a pollutant of that culture, right? So like it's kind of just like out of place. It's dirt. It's kind of like monsters are the social equivalent of this, right? They help define what's clean, what's sacred, what's moral, what's lawful. And you can also look at this as like from a moral perspective, right? So punishing any deviance that reinforces belonging. And we have talked about extensively in other episodes, so I will not like go into it, but like we have an evolutionary need to be part of these groups. So when there is like some kind of fear of punishment for not belonging, that triggers that fear response in our brain towards the dominant group instead of doing our own thing and maybe even recognizing the real patterns that are existing, right? And so it's essentially a scapegoat mechanism. So as this tension builds, and so like say the witch trials, right? Women gaining more and more freedom, blame has to condense somewhere. And usually because we live in these systems of power, these hierarchies, this blame isn't going to be on the actual issue, patriarchy, the church, white supremacy, colonialism. It's going to go somewhere else, and kind of expelling this tension is what restores the order. So if we're looking at like the witch hunts, all the moral panics, the digital shaming that's happening, like monstering is essentially group therapy for fear through violence. And we see that happening. And like modern neuroscience sees this happening as well. So a shared fear, so not an individual fear, when you can release your fear as a group, it releases oh God, I can never say this word. Oxytocin. Yeah. So when you release fear as a group, so not an individual, but as a group, your brain releases oxytocin. And this strengthens your in-group bonds, which is just an insane finding. And so we literally feel closer to one another when we fear together. I mean, this can get into like trauma bonding and all this other stuff. And it's not necessarily true, authentic relationships, but it is a in-group bond. And that's literally why outrage online and in person spreads so much faster than anything like empathy, because it like is a performance of group cohesion.
It's like my brain is like, this is great, but also this is terrible. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, how fantastic that, like, yeah, put a group of people together who are fearing something, or like you say, who have been through trauma, and talking through that together and feeling closer and getting the benefit from it. But then actually how society is using fear like as a like to manipulate us and to then make us feel like we are closest together, to make us release oxytocin, to make us feel good through this fear that they have basically just created for nothing. Do you know what I mean?
And that's why you see in the political literature, which we're going to have a really cool guest on next series, guys, talking about this, is these more, I guess, political leanings that are more based in fear. So oftentimes, like, more conservatives are more based in fear. They're more hierarchical and they're more reactive, and there's less emotional intelligence and things like that. And that's because so much of it is relying on that amygdala rather than like thinking through things and patterns. And so like the monstering is quick. It's like, you snap, there's the monster. Whereas other people are less likely to do that and they do a bit more thinking first. And so I just think it's so fascinating when we're talking about like the monstering of groups today. So we've got the individual and the social psychology, but that inevitably evolves into culture. And so, especially as our social bonds and groups grow, culture and cognition kind of feed each other, right? Our brain's predictive system feeds our culture, and then our culture trains the brain. And that's why you can never take psychology and sociology as completely separate things. You must integrate them. And in terms of monsters, once a society invents a monster, that framework, that schema becomes a mental shortcut for future anxieties. So that's kind of what I was talking about with the witches last time. When you asked, like, I wonder what would happen if, like, this demonizing of women and persecution of women as witches when they gained some autonomy, what if that never happened? And I was like, well, I doubt that we would be where we are. That wouldn't have produced the model for oppressing women that we still have today in the backlash. And this witch template reappears in the hysterical women of the 19th century. It appears in this backlash against women with feminism that we talk about a lot, like the feminazi, the comparing women to witches like Hillary Clinton and other stuff that we talked about last year. And it just reappears over and over and over. And that's our template for dealing for women who step out of the bounds. And I wonder if it's just like the most extreme and early example of hostile sexism,
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, how, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but like from the monsters we spoke about in the last episode, the witch is like it feels like it's the only one that is still kind of used against women, in like modern day. Like, I wouldn't say, like, you're not really calling anyone. Are you calling people a vampire? Are you calling people werewolves? I mean, maybe there's something I'm missing, but it feels like that's
just picturing like
some
misogynist being like, you're a werewolf.
Yeah, maybe we need to bring that back. No,
yeah.
But do you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting how that the witch has like lived on to be used against
us.
Yeah.
What we haven't really touched on is how a lot of these images, especially the ones applied to women like witches, have been reclaimed by groups. So like me personally having a witch tattoo on my arm and just like liking witchy vibes, and just like as a more of like a rebellious or like what like the idea of like acknowledging what happened and where we are, and just like a symbol almost of like women's autonomy. I think it's being used. I mean, it's also being co-opted. We've talked about it in our alt-right pipeline that like witchy vibes have been co-opted a little bit by that like little wellness atmosphere. But some of this stuff, like even like vampires are being like reclaimed as cool, and like, Twilight and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But I think you're right. Like, I think it would be really weird to go around calling somebody like sorry, that something just popped into my head. Nobody's going and being like, you're a vampire, and that's like a bad thing. Maybe like a Frankenstein is thrown around. I feel like that could be probably used as like an ableist slur.
Yes. Yeah.
But even just like the crazy lonely cat lady is essentially like a witch like attack, because it's harking back to the same stuff. So you're right. I wonder why that's so, like, it just lasts. Maybe it is just so powerful, and given that template, like we were saying, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if like any of the other ones, and yeah, you guys will have to let us know if there are any we're kind of missing. But I wonder if there's any, like you say, if the witch is now like reimagined as like crazy cat lady, have any of the other ones been reimagined that we can almost link back to like more modern, like uses of the monster? That would be interesting.
I think zombies probably the closest one. I mean, I know that it was co-opted and stolen from Haitian culture, but I think there's a reason that it resonates with people so much with late stage capitalism and, you know, just destroying your body and being a soulless monster and having no control over your body in the day and age that we live in. So I see like reiterations of that constantly. I feel like that's a really resonant one. I can't think of anything else though. But essentially, this kind of cultural evolution that provides us these blueprints almost mirrors our genetic and psychological evolution. So, like, these ideas mutate over time, they compete, and they survive by emotional impact. So, I wonder if that's why, like, certain ones have so much more permanence in our society. Like, it's literally like a virus. Fear has the highest transmission rate, like, of all of our emotions. It's like so easy to transmit between people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
Yeah, because if we look at it from like a neurological point of view, fear engages both your amygdala and your dopamine reward system. So the relief that you get after a threat becomes pleasurable, especially in like group settings. And that's why people literally pay money to go to like a horror house, like one of those haunted houses, or go see a scary movie and like all this kind of stuff.
I do like scary films.
I don't. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself?
I do like a scary film. Sometimes I regret it later when I'm like walking upstairs, go to bed, and there's like shadows everywhere, and I'm like,
you're like sprinting up the stairs.
I'm gonna die. But it's always this. I don't know if this is the right word, but I keep thinking how like fear can almost be something that's like self-indulgent, like in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. That almost makes me think of like, so there's the two sides, right? There's like, okay, people like the oppressed using monsters to define their reality, like zombies. But then I also think there's a certain level of privilege to wanting to be scared for fun. Do you know what I mean? Like who has like, well, I don't know if that's right because it is releasing dopamine when you're safe again. But like it just reminds me of like people who make fun of people for camping. Like that's the whitest thing you can do. Why would you like go sleep outside in a tent in the cold and not have hot food when you literally have a house? Do you know what I mean? It's just giving me that kind of like vibe.
But as you were talking, it made me think of actually I guess this is kind of what we've been talking about throughout a lot of this episode really, but it is like if you're the one who is afraid, if you're the one that you're not the monster, you're the one who is fearful, then we make ourselves the victim. And I think there can be something in we don't want to be the ones that are responsible. It's kind of almost self-indulgent sometimes to be like, well, actually I'm the victim in this situation, you know.
Definitely.
And that kind of has a function in itself.
Definitely. I mean, we have to find different ways to experience positive emotions to release those positive chemicals in our brains. And in a society that constantly is depleting ways to do that, like we're just going to start seeking other ways, like watching scary movies at Halloween or like doing like, I don't know, like kind of adrenaline rush stuff. I mean, adrenaline rush is a different thing as well. It's probably very similar to this. And that something that's related to this, I think, is predictive processing theory, which is super interesting. It reframes this kind of pleasure that we're seeking in like a very scientific way, where the brain is constantly predicting the sensory input, but when the prediction fails, but it's a safe failure, so you're in the safety of your own home, so you still have this level of safety. It triggers learning and reward. So like it's just like rehearsals for chaos. It's almost like, you know how kids will play hide and seek and try to scare each other. It's the same thing. It's like safe violations of like an expectation that you have. That's aggressive. That's aggressive language.
I always hated hide and seek. Absolutely hated it. Because I was like, either nobody's going to find me, right? Or they're like, I don't know, like there was a fear of also being found, like then I don't know, you've like lost or whatever.
Mm.
So I just wouldn't want to engage with it at all in the first place. I would hate to hide, like hate it.
Well, I was the opposite. I always wanted to hide because I was a really good hider. And then no one would find me and I would just get to sit there alone. And I
No,
was playing with my friend.
yeah. Well, that's a better way of looking at it. Yeah, just going and yeah. But no, hated that hide and seek. Also sardines. Yeah, didn't enjoy
Like
sardines.
literally, I didn't picture a game. I pictured like, oh, she's talking about how she doesn't like these fish, like from the tin.
I
I'm
do
like,
hate
Laura,
fish.
that's
I
very
do
random, but
hate
I
to eat
agree.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also afraid of eating fish, but will not be practicing that.
Yes.
Yeah. And like basically it's how we learn any behavior and like how to practice being uncertain, how we practice like engaging in fear. It's like literally just like a self-imposed by our species exposure therapy.
Yeah. And I guess it does speak to this idea then of like what we're saying around these like the monsters that get depicted in society and like kind of I think like we were saying in the first episode, it's like not turning away from that and just accepting it as, you know, what we're being told it is, but like turning towards it and looking a little bit more deeply and getting to know it like a little bit, you know? So that exposure, if you like, to that thing and not just assuming that because it's, I don't know, scaly, spiky, whatever, like on the outside, that actually that's something that we need to be afraid of.
Definitely. And I think that links it really well in the sense that like there's a reason we have evolved this practice to engage with fear. It's because we're meant to be confronting this stuff head on rather than projecting it onto something else. But we also decide to project it onto other stuff. So I feel like the more modern monsters where we have it in like a like entertainment function serves both. So it serves the purpose of displacement and projection, but also this kind of like exposure therapy at the same time, and it feels very entangled, and like one of them's like kind of like a healthy coping mechanism and the other is like an irresponsible projection.
Yes. It makes me think of Sully, you know, like Sully from Monsters Inc. How like I guess in the monster world, he's Sully and he's nice and he's, you know, he's silly. But then you go into the human world and he's terrifying and people fear him and you know what I mean? So it's again like just this it's a shift in context and a shift in also just under what do we think is scary or fearful in the first place. So again, it's this kind of very cultural like lens on it as well.
That made me like further contextualize this your example, because I feel like the stuff we're able to sensationalize as entertainment is all historical monsters for the most part. It's not like we're currently like entertaining, unless you're the shittiest person in the world, using entertainment out of monstering immigrants or trans people or women right now, right? Because it's but like it's so safe for us to watch a scary movie about something that isn't real, about monsters, like about vampires, about Frankenstein. So I guess it's not as much displacement for the old school monsters. It's like it started as a displacement, but now it's entertainment and practice. Whereas like the modern monsters, in heavy quotes, that society has monstered is where the displacement is going.
Yeah. Interesting.
My brain hurts now.
I know. We're doing some deep thinking here. But I think this also brings makes me kind of link this into the existential bit. And it kind of made me think about it a bit because again, let's talk about, I suppose, existentialism. So I suppose what we're thinking about really is like death, right? Fear of death. So it's not just the literal sense of, you know, dying and like being dead, but it is that existential psychology is arguing that we as humans are cursed in a sense in like knowing that we will die. And I think that this is interesting as well when we think from that like cultural perspective, because obviously some cultures are much more accepting and almost championing in a sense of death, whereas some like ours are very much like no, death, like be afraid of it, right? And so this kind of, I guess, knowing that at some point we are gonna die, this kind of allows us to, in a sense, like in our mind, like plan, create and imagine and anticipate like our own death, right? Which can be really overwhelming. It can be a lot. And this awareness, it sparks fear, but it also creates this kind of tension, I suppose, between our like animal vulnerability and our need for a symbolic permanence.
Yeah, I just feel like there's this need to be, well, we are vulnerable to death no matter what, right? We're not alone in the animal kingdom of being able to engage in symbolism. We've seen like crows and elephants and other like arguably like really intelligent creatures doing this, but I think we are very unique in how symbolic we are. And because we are aware that we can die, but we're also very much aware of our lives and we don't want them to end, we want to make some way to be permanent. That's like where zombies come, or for like the mummy thing, it's like vampires. Like we just want this idea that, you know, it could be forever. I mean, I totally would love to be a vampire. Like that.
But you were gonna say dead. No, it's
no,
oh my gosh.
No. So we apply a lot of meaning to that kind of like permanence, right? And so like a lot of us look for the symbolic permanence through, some of us might be trying to make symbolic change through our writing, through our connections with people, through parenting, you know, through continuing your lineage and things like that. This idea that you just want the world to kind of still know that you're here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess we kind of live this out in, like you say, almost trying to find like a legacy or something. Like you hear people talking about that quite a lot, I suppose. Like, what are you leaving behind? Kind of what is the legacy, to try and kind of keep building that meaning that's outliving us. But what I think is like interesting and I guess kind of paradoxical is that we were talking before around how, you know, there is a fear of like uncertainty, right? And like death is probably one of the only things that is like certain in everybody's life at some point. Yet it's also something that we like deeply, deeply fear. Like I think it's interesting how we, at least as a culture, don't view death as just like a natural part of life. It's like we struggle to accept that that is something that is that is okay. Yeah.
But that's like so deeply ingrained into our evolution. That's why we have fear, is so that we don't die. I feel like a lot of the anxieties we have around lack of control can be tied to a fear of death, because that is the like, or not a fear of control, out of a fear of uncertainty is tied to that fear of death, is because if it's uncertain, it could kill us. And that's what our brains tell us. So some cultures have been able to deal with this quite well and offer meaning in death, or at least acceptance of it, where we like to project or displace that to somewhere else.
Yeah, so we're putting it on the, I don't know, Grim Reaper, onto the, like, the mummy,
Yeah.
the zombie, and so on. And so I guess it's making us feel, able to navigate, I guess, that idea of, like, mortality, in a sense, by having these figures that we can, like, displace it onto. And it's, again, this idea, it's like externalizing. So we're externalizing a piece of our own existential anxiety. So whether that is around us, losing control, losing ourselves, or like losing a significance, we're able to, put that onto something else rather than struggle with it inside.
Yeah. And I think we do that a lot through meaning.
I think that's always an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's like, how much is there really meaning, or how much are we, again, just trying to create that as something to help us feel better, something to kind of externalize, like a purpose. Yeah. Existentialism.
It's literally making me question everything right now. Exciting.
So we're thinking about death, but I guess our relationship like with these monsters is never just about death. Like Kristin says, it's like about meaning as well. It's about this kind of meaning maintenance. And it's our attempt to try and prove that we are something more than just just a body, just something that is like biological, something that is like waiting to decay in a sense.
Spooky, Laura. Very
Sorry.
spooky.
We are all just waiting to decay. I
Wow.
mean, depends what you decide to do when you die.
I love how like we are literally ending this episode, this series with existential dread. Like
cool.
literally like harking
Sorry,
back to our
everyone.
intro. Yeah, but you know what?
Yeah. Maybe
But, I mean-
maybe that's why more people nowadays get cremated than they do buried because of the decay. Anyway.
The decay. Laura's like doing like a really dramatic hand movement. Yeah, I
Right.
can see that. Yeah, because then we can sit
Maybe-
on a shelf in like a fun little jar.
But that's also dreadful though, isn't it? Oh well.
I have a family friend who carried her partner around all around the world and spread his ashes all around the world. And one time he tipped over in the airport security and she spilled some, or like the airport security guy spilled it. And he was like, oh, sorry. She's like, that's my husband.
Was she
And, like,
okay?
Yeah, no, like she like was laughing because he would have found that hilarious.
Okay,
like there's a
nice.
reason it's a funny story because the guy was more to find. He was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she's like, nope, well, he's staying at this airport now.
I
That's
love
so funny.
that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what a nice thing to do, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. That was lovely.
Aww.
Sorry, guys, to like end on cremation, but
So,
let's briefly like reorient towards monsters.
What are we talking about? Right.
So like, I guess to kind of summarize the last 3 episodes, also I'm just like dying on where Laura took us at the end.
Apologies.
So all of this, so like our reactive wiring, our need for stories to give us meaning or explain what's happening, our moral panics and myths, all of it began as survival to avoid death, which apparently we're just going to keep coming back to in the episode.
Oh, we need to do a full series on death. I'm feeling this now. We need to really.
Well, because we're both displacing our
moment.
uncomfortability, which is like laughing hysterically.
I'm very uncomfortable with death. Yes. Yeah.
But like this fear has taught us like a ton of vigilance. It's taught us storytelling, and that storytelling kind of gave that fear a shape that we could conceptualize easier, and then culture then turned it into meaning that we can use. So every era that we've talked about, monsters tell the same story but just like slightly differently, right? So what we fear most is what's happening to us. It's what's happening in our society. So when we looked at witches, we saw how fear tries to police women's knowledge and autonomy. When we looked at werewolves, we looked at like the fear of kind of just like the fear of. Are we like delirious now? Is this what's happening?
Yes. I think it's happened.
If we ever do like shows, instead of doing pre-shows, we should do post-show like Patreon stuff, because apparently this is when we start to like really devolve. So for werewolf.
I don't even know what's funny anymore.
We're devolving so quick. I guess, talking about death just really gets us going.
It's like my defense mechanism or something. It's like, just laugh.
Okay.
Oh, God. Okay,
what the
fuck?
fuck?
I've been crying.
When it's just...
Okay.
What did werewolves teach us? Because it's
Okay.
I might skip werewolves.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess start this over. Okay. We are normal people. My face hurts. Okay. Uh, when we looked at keep seeing your face.
Now. I know.
I'm gonna hide your face so I can just say
absolutely
this.
Fine. Yeah, do it.
Okay.
Go for it.
Don't make any noises. That I'm screwed. When we looked at witches, we saw how fear can police women's knowledge and their bodies. When we looked at Frankenstein, we saw how kind of curiosity turns into fear and guilt. With zombies and mummies, it was like exploitation and empire, and how this kind of how they write their shame onto other people's bodies. And now looking at all these psychology underneath it, we see how it's really just about trying to manage being human, which is a super fun thing that we get to do. And so your brain was built to see these monsters, and that's what's so interesting, right? Is like we were built to see this, but we've not evolved to unsee it, which would be super useful. Telling stories, and this is like also superhuman, telling the stories that once kept us like all huddled around and alert around the fire together as a small social group, also gave us a way to look at these monsters safely. To, like Laura was saying, name what hurts us, what we see in ourselves that we might not like, to see ourselves in the dark and maybe stay curious about it instead of terrified. So I think that's a more healthy way of looking at it. They've always been warnings and mirrors, and they're showing us what we're repressing as a society. What do we punish? Like, what difference do we punish? What are we idealizing? What are we worshiping? And what are we displacing? What are we refusing to feel? And maybe that's why we just keep making them, because they're the cultural technology that kind of lets us look directly at what we fear and call it story, right? Well, if we do it the right way, monsters can let us practice courage and negotiate meaning. But that's when we do it the right way, right? Societies can do it the wrong way. So they're
I think that the monsters are just I think for me, like, I think it's helpful to always have a visual for these sorts of, I guess, fears or uncertainties or whatever it might be. And I think that because a lot of these like monster figures that we've seen in society, like, we get so used to seeing them that we just don't think about the background to them. We don't think about why they're there. So I think it's been like, because I love a good monster, right? But I think it's been really interesting throughout the series just to like unpack them a bit more, look at the history, and then think about what I guess is like the function of these monsters. And while sometimes they might have a function that is useful, like in some senses, a lot of the time it is hiding something that, yeah, we would prefer not to be looking at. So I think again, it's coming back to again what you said right near the beginning, like, let's use them to like try and look behind them, right? Try and see where are they coming from to help us make sense of the world a bit more. And maybe also in like a personal sense, thinking more about our monsters and what they might be and what we are hiding in them.
Love that. You always manage to like build such a nice little reflection out of it. It's awesome. I love it.
Oh, good. I didn't know if that made any sense, but
I thought it made sense, but I'm also delirious right now.
We are both delirious.
Yes. Well, we recovered from our laughing fit quite well, I think.
Yes,
you guys should be proud of us. We got a little unhinged for a solid few minutes. But thank you guys so much for listening. As always, we probably here we go again. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, we probably left you with more questions than answers, but that's kind of the point. We love digging into the messy undercurrents of why we keep making monsters and just this whole monster series as a whole. Do you guys have any thoughts or questions? We really want to hear about it, so drop us a comment or message us. And if there's a topic you want us to dig into next, please get in touch, because we're always up for a new rabbit hole. If you like the episode, please like, follow, rate, whatever your platform allows, and definitely tell your friends. I always feel really funny saying that. Tell your friends about us.
If you have any friends.
I know, I always want to say that. I'm like, that sounds really aggressive, but
no stress if you don't have friends. That's okay. Tell your monsters. That's cool.
I thought you were going to say tell your mom. Okay, you can find all of our links on the But Why Instagram page. Just head into the bio for everything. And remember, the first step to understanding is asking, but why?
Yay! We did it!